me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Now, of course, I'm your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, Season 3, Episode 2 of Commander's Log has been released. Wanted to give you guys an opportunity to watch it, so kind of waited a little bit before I released this video. But obviously, as I always do, I wanted to react to the episode. These things have become must-watch and must-see TV when they release them, and we expect to see another 3 or 4 episodes in the season. I think, how many did they have last year? 5 or 6? So I think we'll be in that neighborhood again. And we kind of see what the format is now, right? This year is going to be a little bit different, obviously, because we actually hired a new GM, a new coach, new staff, etc., etc. So the episode was a little bit different in episode 1. Not so much like last year where they were kind of recapping the year before and kind of looking forward to the next year. We see what the combine format is, though, and they did this kind of last year. Last year, again, because there was not as much turnover and there wasn't as many new faces, they kind of stayed internal, talked to some of the scouts and talked to guys about the combine and, you know, all of that stuff. Not so much of that this year because you have new faces, so they wanted to introduce the fan base to a lot of these new coaches. Some we already knew, like Tavita Pritchard, for instance, but others like O-line Bobby Johnson and Daryl Tapp, who was very heavily featured in this particular episode. We heard from those guys. Heard from some of the players, obviously, that have signed in free agency. But this really was about DQ and him putting together this staff, setting the table for GM Adam Peters and Lance Newmark and some of the newer hires, and kind of looking at where the team has come from. Him being hired, which was episode 1 essentially. Much of that was Peters being hired and then Quinn being hired to now, all right, now let's hit the ground running. You got the combine and you got free agency and, you know, this kind of leading up to where we're going to probably get our next episode, which is the draft, right? So episode 2 of season 3 was entitled One Awesome Pot of Gumbo. And I love our fan base because I knew this was going to happen. It didn't take very long. Of course, I'm a lurker, so I went into the comment section and read some of the comments, and I may have scrolled down maybe 4 comments and ran into, oh, pot of gumbo. That means we're taking Jaden Daniels at number 2. Welcome to DC. Man, I love our fan base. So that line came from Daryl Tapp, and they saved it for the very end of the episode. I actually thought they could have used one of the new quotes that they have hanging up around the facility for this episode. And maybe they'll save that for another episode down the road. This, one of the quotes that I'm going to give you, one of the new slogans, if you will, that I think they'll be utilizing. And I think one of these 2 slogans is going to get out of the building and they're going to use it to promote the upcoming season. And I'm advocating for it. And we'll get to that a little bit later on in this react video, but I thought that could have been the title of this particular video, but maybe they're saving that for another one of these Commander's Logs episodes. But if they would be doing themselves a disservice if one of these episodes isn't named after one of these slogans, and I'll tell you which one a little bit later on. But this episode was entitled One Awesome Pot of Gumbo. So the episode starts with the hire of the coordinators. So again, picking up where they left off in episode 1, which was hiring of Dan Quinn and going through that process. And so obviously he hired Joe Witt Jr. to be his defensive coordinator and Cliff Kingsbury to be his offensive coordinator. So they kind of started the episode there. And then from there, there's a staff meeting that really kicks off the episode. And Quinn has all of the staff members in a meeting, meets with the coaches, and kind of delivers a message. And I wanted to read, because Dan Quinn, DQ drops some gems on your melon, right? And so the first thing I want to say is our GM and assistant GM, they're going to be boring, and I love it. Okay, these guys are they're all work and no play essentially, right? And they're going to smile a lot, and they're not going to be stoic, but these guys are grinders. Okay, like they came from the bottom. They started at the very bottom of the totem pole as area scouts, and they grinded. I mean, you heard Lance Newmark's story, and we'll talk about it here in a second. But they grinded their way up, and that's all they know. All they know is ball, right? Watching these prospects and evaluating, at their core, they just want to watch tape. They want to grind. And so all this camera shit and smiling for the camera and being funny, that's not what they do. And even Brad Holmes talked about Lance Newmark, and we'll talk about that in a second, and how he's a man of few words, and you can tell, right? We'll get to that. But our coach isn't boring, okay? He's going to be the guy that's going to be energetic. And we've been told this already, but we're seeing it firsthand. He's going to be the life of the party here, okay? When it comes to us being entertained, Dan Quinn is going to keep us entertained, right? And so he talks about a philosophy of coaching. And I think this is a profound quote that he gave us here, and the message that he was delivering to his staff about coaching and how you can get the most out of a player, but it starts with the relationship. And one of the things we've heard about DQ to a man is that he's a master of the relationship. Part of the reason why guys will follow him to the depths of the earth is because of the relationships he's fostered all around the NFL. And you saw that with him walking through the combine, meeting people, seeing people he hadn't seen and ran into in a while. We saw that from the reaction that Adam Peters got in episode 1 when he was at the Senior Bowl, when it was announced that Dan Quinn was the hire. And everyone that speaks about him speaks very glowingly about how he cares about them as a person, as a human, not as a player and what you can do for me, but he just cares at a human level. Like, put all of this football shit aside. How are you doing? How's your family doing? He actually genuinely cares. F.A. Obata's story is a great example of that when he broke his leg last year in Week 11 against the Giants. So, again, this quote that I'm about to read you from Dan Quinn at this staff meeting is further proof about Dan Quinn and his ability to reach players and establish relationships with people, and that's what allows him to be as good of a coach as and a person as he's been throughout his career. He says, quote, "You can coach somebody to the depth of the relationship with them. The more you know them, the harder and deeper you can coach them. If it's at a surface level relationship, it'll probably be surface level coaching." Closed quote. That is so true on so many levels. If you've ever played sports, and I don't care at what level, pee-wee, midget, bantam, travel team, high school, middle school, college, professionally, it never changes. If there's an established relationship with the coach, that coach is able to coach you harder. He's able to be a little bit more abrasive with you to try and get the most out of you, because you know as a player where it's coming from. It's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of motivation and trying to get the best out of you. If you don't love a coach, or you don't get along with a coach, and that guy's riding you and he's giving you a hard time, then it's going to end up being it's going to be an adversarial relationship, and you're not going to get the most out of that player. And so the first thing you have to do is you got to establish a relationship. And it was funny because Eric Bieniemy talked about establishing relationships, but I don't think he did a very good job of it, right? I don't think he came in here and made himself the ally of these players, but he came in and he tried to rule with an iron fist with guys that he didn't bring in here that was here before him, and they were doing things a certain way. Not that they were having success, right? But you got to establish, and the enemy talked about that, but he didn't do it. And that was the problem. You can talk about it, but you got to do it. And the reason why guys like Brian Robinson Jr. and Logan Thomas and Charles Leno Jr. and Sam Cosmi and Terry McLaurin and others kind of stood up and revolted against Eric Bieniemy was because he never came in and established that relationship. He just tried to ride these guys. And you can't do that, even at this level. And I love that quote from Dan Quinn. Every coach that I've had a close relationship with has been able to get the most out of me because they've been able to take me to that next level. They've been able to really get after me and me not take offense to it because I knew where it was coming from. And we had that prior relationship. So that makes a ton of sense. And anybody who's ever played sports, that probably resonates with you as well. And again, I always say, sports is a microcosm of life. So it doesn't just lend itself to just sports. You can extrapolate this and put it to any walk of life. Work. If you've got a really good relationship with your boss can be a little bit of a hard ass to you, but you're not going to take it personal because you know your boss and you guys have a relationship, right? Outside of work. And Quinn said, look, it doesn't always have to be something that you're doing with that player at the facility. If they're in town, hey, what are you doing? Hey, let's get up for dinner. Make yourself available and establish that relationship and show that player that you truly care, right? So, thought that was great. Also, in that staff meeting, we get introduced to Daryl Tapp, the defensive line coach that they brought in here from San Francisco. He was the assistant defensive line coach with the 49ers. He comes here. You saw Adam Peters dap him up because, of course, he came from San Francisco. So there's a working relationship between the two. That's part of the reason probably Daryl Tapp is even here. Obviously, Dan Quinn had a relationship with him too, having coached him for 1 year in Seattle, which is what he talked about early on in this episode. But also, there's an Adam Peters relationship. And just about every single guy in that building has some sort of connection, some sort of relationship with somebody in the building, or there's an affinity there that they may have seen them from afar, coached against them, respect them, and say, hey, let's go out and get that guy. But a lot of the coaches, and we've talked about this when each of these guys were hired, what the connection most likely was. But Daryl Tapp talked about his time growing up in the area. So he had a chance to play for Washington back in 2013. He also talked about now getting an opportunity to coach, his first opportunity to lead a room because he's always been, an assistant of some sort. Now he's the actual D-line coach. And so he talked about DQ's impact on him and the opportunity that exists in front of him. We also hear from Tavita Pritchard, the quarterback's coach, who was one of the few holdovers from the last staff, in addition to O-line Bobby Johnson, who was brought in here to try to spruce up the offensive line. There's still doubts about O-line Bobby Johnson, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and see how things go. But those are two guys that we'll also hear from, along with Daryl Tapp, in terms of the coaching staff throughout the episode. Tavita Pritchard talked about profile tapes, and Dan Quinn spoke about that as well. And these are the coaching staff's homework, essentially, to put together tape for the players to kind of see what this system looks like and what they could potentially look like in this system. If it's run correctly, this is what it should look like. And so every positional coach is tasked with putting together, clips and cut-ups of what this system is ultimately going to look like when it's a finished product, and kind of have that ready for when the players show up. So that was one of the things they talked about. Then we got into the combine, sort of, and it started with the introduction of Lance Newmark, who was hired as the assistant GM here. from Detroit. We've talked about Lance Newmark a ton. I was so excited when that hire was made because it's another guy that is just a an evaluator at his core. It is what he does. Going back to when he was in Detroit, I remember watching that episode of In the Lion's Den, and he was sitting in the room by himself in the dark watching film, and he's like, "Look, it starts with the film. Like, I don't want to know anything else about him. I don't want to know if he's a head case off the field. I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything else about him. I just want to watch the tape, and then after I'm done, then you can interject with all of that other stuff, and then we can determine if the guy's worth it or not. But I want to grind and watch the tape first, and that's where he lives, right? This is why I think we're gonna end up putting together a hell of a roster. When you put AP together with Lance Newmark, um, it's almost like you can't fail, right? Again, I talk about it like being like a Shaq Kobe, Mike Pip type of relationship where I think we got two dudes that could really lead this team and this organization into the future with a ton of talent. But you get the introduction to Lance Newmark, Brad Holmes. We talked about what Holmes had to say about him, who is the GM in Detroit. He spoke very candidly about Lance Newmark and losing him, and talking about how good of a guy he was and how Washington was getting a good one. And he talked about that at the combine, and he said, you hate to lose guys like Lance Newmark. He's a man of few words, but when he speaks, it's pretty profound. And you can tell, right? Even at the combine and the footage that we had with AP being mic'd up, Lance Newmark doesn't say much. Like, he's locked in. He's watching these prospects. He introduced himself, said he had been in the Lions organization for over 20 years, like 26 years or something like that, which is crazy to be with one organization that long. And he looks good for his age, honestly. If he's been in the game that long, he's probably hovering around 50 is my guess, somewhere in that 45 to 50 range. But again, he's just a grinder, much like Adam Peters, who's 44 years old, and he's been in the game for over 20 years, right? Like, these guys have dedicated their lives to this craft. So we go to the combine, and what we found is they've got a formula. Does the Commanders production team, when they're shooting these videos for the Commanders log at the combine, because every year we usually get a combine video. And what we found is that their formula is we're going to find some media type or two. Last year it was Ian Rappaport they talked to, sat him down in a room and got some info from him and got some quotes about the Commanders, and they played that throughout. They also talked to Maurice Jones-Drew last year, if you recall. Remember, that was sort of the Eric Bieniemy angle too, because he coached Maurice Jones-Drew at UCLA. So they sat down a couple of the media types last year. They did it again this year. So they ran back that formula. So it looks like that's going to be the formula moving forward. This year, the Ian Rappaport was Kimberly A. Martin of ESPN and Mike Garafolo. Those were the two the individuals that they decided to talk to and kind of throw in some quotes from them throughout the episode. And then you also got them showing Adam Peters at the combine in the press box watching the prospects. One of the things that I always wonder, we'll never know. I mean, you're never going to know who they're talking about. But I'm dying to know who they're talking about. He goes, man, this guy's helped himself through the process, at a really strong Senior Bowl. And he's sitting next to Lance Newmark, who's on his right, and Martin Mayhew, who's on his left, as they're watching these guys go through the drills at the combine. And he's talking about, man, that guy's a good player, or that guy's really fast, and he's fast and physical. And I always, want to know who they're talking about. We'll never know. They're never going to show us. But that's always one of the things I always wonder, like, who are they talking about? AP was in the booth, and he's eating popcorn and he's saying better than the movies, like, because this is what he does, man. This is the grind for him. This is what he loves to do. And I was sitting there saying the same thing. I'm like, shit, these episodes are better than the movies, right? I enjoy this, right? He also had a joke, and this probably went over 70% of your heads, and rightfully so. The movie that he was referencing was in 1983. So I know a lot of you. It's one of my favorite movies. So I got the joke right away. But he was talking about players, and one of the players he talked about, ended up running fast and having a really good day. And he's like, man, he had a strong, you know, Senior Bowl, and now he's continuing that here at the combine, and he runs well. And he's like, man, I wish we could have, bought stock in him early before all of this kind of transpired. And he's like, what do they call that? Futures? And Lance Newmark looks over like, yeah, like, stop talking to me. I'm watching the combine. And so, Adam Peters continues like, or your futures and oranges. And then he's like, orange juice, orange futures, and orange juice, right? And they start laughing because they all know the reference came from Trading Places. Those who know, right? Clarence Beaks, and anyway, sell, right? So they start laughing, and Newmark says something back, and it was kind of inaudible. I couldn't really hear it. I've written it back like 4 or 5 times trying to hear what he said, but I couldn't make it out. Maybe one of you can tell me what he said, but they shared a laugh there. And then he's a family man, and I can relate to this, having small children. His wife called him on the phone, FaceTimed him, or as I like to say, because I can't stand Apple, they duoed, each other. Or I think it's now Google Meet is what they've changed it to. But either way, he's probably got an iPhone. It's dirty. And he was up there with his wife, and she's like, I don't want to be on television. And he's like, they can't see you, don't worry about it. But he shows the kids and tells them to say hi to the camera. And it just reminds me of me, my wife, and my kids. I go somewhere and my wife is gonna duo me, and I'm gonna see the kids and talk to them. But he's a family man, right? So he's like, all right, that's enough. He's like, you ready to get out of here? Lance Newmark's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, that's enough. We're done, right? So, like I said, these guys are going to be boring. But I love it because this is who they are. They're grinders, okay? You're not going to get any really juicy footage from them. DQ is where, if you want some excellent footage and great sound bites, you got to go to DQ for that, right? Which I'm all for it. So speaking of DQ, you see him interacting with people at the combine in typical DQ fashion. Dude is cool as ice, and he is one of those guys that just has an infectious personality. You see him, he's gonna speak to you, and he's gonna connect with you. And so he ran into, I want to say, I can't think of the coach. I want to say it was either Kevin O'Connell, or it was either Kevin O'Connell or it was the Cleveland Browns coach. One of the two. I can't remember which one. It was one of those coaches. And I don't think it was O'Connell because the coach wasn't very tall. I can't remember who it was. But he dapped him up, and then he ended up talking to Albert Breer, dapped him up and started talking to him, and Breer was asking him about AP and how that was going, and he was like, man, it's great. We were watching tape together, and I was telling my wife, this is really going to work. This is going to be great, right? So then he runs into Kimberly A. Martin, and they have a shoe conversation because she had on some ones, right? And they were some red and black ones. They were fire, and he was like, yeah, those are nice. And she's like, yo, you just took your first L of the season, because DQ usually has on his 12s, right? We talked about that already, the low cut 12s. And he was like, "Yo, I didn't know this was a contest. I would have showed up, with much better game." And there was another dude standing there that apparently DQ knew, and he was like, "Yo, he knows. My shoe game is tight. Now, if you really want to go there, we can go there." And the dude, he dapped the dude up, and the dude was like, "Yeah, nah, DQ, he can get it in. Like with the shoe game, it's crazy, it's sick." And so Kimberly A was like, "Yo, I know what it is. I know the game, but I got you this time." And he was like, "Yeah, you got me. Those are fire on your feet right there. That's some heat on your feet. Call that feet heat. Yeah, you got it. Don't worry about it. Next time I see you, it'll be a different story." Like I love DQ though, cause he's dripping with swag, right? It's just that's our coach, man. I love it. Remember when we were looking at Nick Sirianni from the side of our eye, like he's a peon, but he does have swag, but he's a peon, right? DQ isn't a peon. He just got swag. Because Ron Rivera was swagless, right? We didn't have any swag in the entire building. None of our guys had swag. Now we have swag. No one on the corner got swagger like us. Swagger like us. Swagger like us. So then, DQ was running the media circuit. And you know how that goes, where you jumping on with this group, and you're jumping on with this network, and you're jumping on with this local TV station, and you're jumping on with this affiliate here. And so he was, making his rounds. And he talked about the 1,234 days, which he said, look, it was easy to remember because it was 1, 2, 3, 4, but that was the last time he had a gig as a head coach. And, it was another one of those profound quotes that you get from DQ. And I think this one just shows the gratitude and appreciation that he has for this opportunity, this second opportunity that he didn't know at one point if he was ever going to get or not. Remember, he kept saying, if I get another chance, if I get another shot, right? So he didn't know if this opportunity was going to come or not, and he's going to seize it this time. And I'm going to read this quote to you. He said, "It's one thing to have the lessons, but then applying them when you get your chance, you want to go nail it, and I'm not going to miss it." Close quote. So I love his enthusiasm and zest for life and zest for the game, but I also love the part about I gotta get it done this time. I gotta win. I'm hungry. I'm starving, and I cannot fail this time. One of the things that drives me as to what I do is I can't fail, right? That's the motivation. I had people when I first started tell me that this shit wasn't gonna work. So every day my mission was to prove them wrong, and I can't fail at this. And Dan Quinn is like, this probably is my last shot. And I've learned so much from the first time and failing, and I can't fail this time. And I won't fail. And that's the difference, is some people go in with the mindset of, I can't fail, or are afraid to fail. But there are others with the mindset of, I'm not going to fail. It's not going to happen. He's got the mindset of, not on my watch. What did Ayanla say? Not on my watch. Not on DQ's watch. He ain't failing, bro. If you want to know why people like myself and others out there have so much confidence right now, and again, you're never going to have more confidence in this group than you have right now, because we haven't done anything yet. We haven't played a game. We haven't seen what this looks like. But and we could have even more confidence. They win a Super Bowl, you're going to be swelling with confidence, right? But the reason why we're swelling with that confidence right now is because we got Adam Peters, we got Lance Newmark, and we got Dan Quinn. And none of these guys look like anything but success. They smell like winning. That aroma coming from Washington right now, from Commanders Park, smells like winning. Something we haven't smelled in a long time. That scent has avoided us for a very long time. We'll see if it's legit, if that deodorant is actually the scent of winning, or if it's just masking the stench of funk of the 25 years of the Dan Snyder era, and eventually that funk will rear its ugly head again as they try to rid us of that wretched stench, right? Whatever the hell's going on right now, I love it. We're in the honeymoon phase, obviously, but I love it. And a lot of the reason why I love it is because of DQ's energy. And to think we didn't want him. I can't speak for everyone. But at the beginning of this process, he wasn't the guy. Far from it. So then they transition to that AP-DQ relationship, right? Like you hear from the former Warriors GM Bob Myers, who was a part of that advisory committee that Josh Harris put together in trying to land Adam Peters. And he talked about the relationship between GM and head coach and how it has to be a very tight-knit bond, a synchronicity that can't be broken. And, he talked about Adam Peters seeing what that looks like up close and personal, and DQ, having seen it as well. And he said those two have seamlessly hit the ground running. And so they show those two at a Georgetown Villanova game. Obviously, Georgetown is one of the local teams in college basketball. So Ed Cooley, who's the new Georgetown head coach, coming over from Providence, they meet him in the locker room after the game, or maybe before the game, and Dan Quinn's telling him, hey, this guy, he was talking about Ed Cooley, is a master recruiter. He's like, and this is our GM right here, Adam Peters. And he said, hey, Ed Cooley tells him, hey, let's go get some dudes. Let's go get some dudes. And so you kind of see that. And Ed Cooley saying, let's go get some dudes was symbolic in the episode, because right after he says that, they go straight in to free agency and the haul that Washington got. And so they start showing a lot of these players, and you start hearing from some of them, Bobby Wagner and Austin Eckler, and we hear from O-line Bobby Johnson talking about the acquisitions of the two guys on the interior. So he talked about the center that we got from Dallas, and he talked about Nick Allegretti, who we got from the Chiefs, and their impact and what they bring to the table. We heard from Cleveland Farrell, and Daryl Tapp talked about him coming over from San Francisco. Cleveland Farrell talked about being from the area and how this is a dream come true for him, because he grew up rooting for the team, him and his entire family, and so to actually have a chance to play for them, it's kind of surreal for him. Then we heard from a couple more of the Dallas guys, right? This time on the defensive side, we heard from Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler Jr., and they both said to a man, I'm here because of DQ. Like, I'm not even going to front, not going to sugarcoat it. Here because of DQ. And Dorrance Armstrong was like, those guys helped shape and mold me, including Joe Witt Jr. And, they made the decision to come here easy, right? And then Dante Fowler Jr. was like, look, DQ already know what it is. I've been his soldier since day one, right? We've been A1s since day one. He drafted me. I was with him in Atlanta. He brought me to Dallas. And wherever he goes, I go, right? It's like my buddy, right? My buddy, my buddy, my buddy, my buddy. Wherever you go, he goes. He's like, bro, I'll run through a steel wall. That man ain't say a brick wall. That man said I'll run through a steel wall for him. So, yeah. shout out to Cameron Payne. Anyway, let me stop being petty and leave Dante Fowler Jr. alone. So we hear from, a number of the free agents, Frankie Louvu and all of those guys talking at their pressers and things of that nature, talking about the opportunity. And it kind of just leads us into the end of the episode. And then you see two of the quotes on the wall, right? Two of the slogans, if you will. And from what we've seen, like if you watch Hard Knocks, I do. I can't speak for anybody else, but generally there's a slogan or slogans around the wall, around the facility, on the wall around the facility. It's the mantra, the rallying cry, if you will. Like for the Jets, watching this past year's Hard Knocks, theirs was all gas, no brakes. So with the Lions, if I'm not mistaken, it was, I can't remember. And it was simple, but it was impactful, right? I forgot what it was. But ours, we have two. And I think one of these is going to make it out of the locker room, meaning they're going to try to promote this and push it. And I think they should. And so the first one is, the only fight that matters is the one we are in. That'll be something that I could see Dan Quinn telling the players all the time, over and over again, to the point that you might hear a player or two recite that during an interview or a press conference, right? When they're talking about the strain or whatever. And you might hear a player say, the only fight that matters is the one that we're in, because generally players regurgitate things that they hear over and over and over again. But the one that I think they're going to try to promote, and they should, I think it's a simple one, it's easy, and it's impactful. And what's funny is I saw people using this on the stream on Thursday night, and I didn't know where it came from. I just thought people were just saying something because they thought it was cool. I didn't know because I hadn't watched the episode. Now I know where they got it from. And it's anybody, anywhere, anytime. It's simple. It's straight to the point. And that sounds like DQ, and it sounds like Joe Witt Jr. It sounds like, bro, we got a dog mentality. And anybody can get it anywhere at any time. How much more simpler and direct do you want it than that? I thought that's what the episode should have been called. But maybe they're saving that title for another episode down the road when they try to start promoting that slogan, right? Because that title, that slogan, anybody, anywhere, anytime, should be a title of one of these episodes. But we'll see. But that, my friends, is episode 2 of season 3. It closes out with Daryl Tapp talking about they're putting together one awesome pot of gumbo, which is the title of this particular episode. And he said, we got all the pieces to the puzzle. We're putting them in the pot. So, tell me what you think. What did you think of episode 2? I enjoyed it just like I did episode 1 of season 3. Off to a great start. I assume that the next episode we'll get is leading up to the draft, right? And kind of getting us prepared in the war room. We'll probably get some of that footage too, and leading up to some of the picks, and then seeing the reaction in the war room and all of that. And then I'm assuming episode 4 will be running around with those draft picks, more likely than not the first round pick, just like they did last year with Emmanuel Forbes, and having him come to all the festivities and things of that nature. So we kind of know what the format is. We'll see if they switch it up or if we get more of the same. And we're not complaining either way. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post, reacting to Commander's Log episode 2 of season 3. One awesome pot of gumbo. Leave it down in the comment section what you thought about the episode or anything that I had to say in terms of reacting to it. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Until next time, you know what it is. Post up. take command. See you guys next time. Have a good one.
Louie T.